Hello, everyone. Welcome back to As Told by Zink with your host, Samantha. I'm in studio right now with Peter. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Nice to be here.
Yes, thank you for coming. I'm really excited. We were just chatting. I'm like, we might as well start because I felt like we were already getting into everything.
Absolutely. We didn't want to give the goodies away.
Yeah, I've been doing extensive research for the past few days, and I've fallen into black holes with your wonderful voice and all of your valuable information and insight. So
Thank you.
now seeing you in real life, I'm like, you're like a little kind of a celebrity to me.
Well, thank you. I'm very, very flattered and honored.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. I still get a little bit, not shocked, but like definitely there's a deep sense of gratitude. The number of people that stop me now on the street or in stores and how I've changed their life or sometimes even saved their life, apparently. It's very humbling.
Yeah, and I mean, just listening to you, I'm like, you're just so endless information and value. So I'm like, there's so much to cover, but I have my topics, but I feel like you could talk to people all day, which you do.
Which I do. Sometimes I need to talk less just to rest. Yeah, but it's as I said, it's just really humbling to know that people are moved by my work, and the fact that I get to contribute and make a difference gives me a very fulfilling life for sure.
Yeah, and do you ever have to recharge your social battery with all of the talking and meetings and podcasts and...
Daily, very much, yes. It's awe-inspiring, and so it's energizing when I get to have conversations like this, or I work with people, I coach with people. You know, I've been speaking at big live events too, and there's always this feeling of like reciprocation with the crowd where they're very enthused and inspired by what I'm sharing, so that can be life-giving. But I also do manage myself in a way that I get plenty of sleep and rest and do my workouts and take care of myself, because otherwise it can be depleting too, but ultimately all for a good cause. So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's tiring, but then you're energized because you're sort of taking everyone else's energy. And I'm sure when they leave, they're like motivated and ready to take on whatever life's challenges are happening. So I wanted to talk about your background and how you got into being the mind architect. I love the word, the term, the name.
Yeah.
How did you stumble upon this? Were you were drawn to it, of course, but how did this all happen?
The work or the title or both?
Well, all of it.
So I think,
very niche.
It is. And the title was definitely sort of, as they say, necessity being the mother of invention. So there was nothing as a moniker that really, for me, resonated with what I did. Like I'd been called a performance coach, a spiritual teacher, hitman for the ego, which was cute for a minute. But it just was, I looked at, well, what am I working on? Which is really helping people to access these deep constraints and limitations of their subconscious mind. And it's sort of a redesign process. So I always loved architecture, and growing up in Europe, there's so many beautiful structures. And I realized that as human beings, we function within a space, and the ultimate space we function in is within our own mind. And depending on the narratives and the dialogues we live within, it gives rise to what's available to us. If we're living in a world where I'm not good enough, it's obviously going to create a somewhat compromised and limited experience of life, right? So I realized, wow, if I can help to redesign people's narratives, then who they become as the precursor to the life they have shifts dramatically. So that was really the birth of the title. And also it wasn't contaminated. If you meet someone who's a spiritual teacher, they're going to think I'm going to walk around with robes and burning incense and, whatever. I've got some sort of cult, but not all spiritual teachers. But I just love the fact that it begged curiosity. People are, oh, that's cool. What does that mean? So then I could get into a dialogue with people. And then with regards to my own, how did I get into this? Just my own traumas and having to overcome my own limitations. And for me, relationships are always the trigger point, and falling head over heels in love, hopefully getting your heart broken, and then realizing that love wasn't out there, it was in me, and shifting our entire relationship to the external world, which most people are constantly trying to control, which is why most people are exhausted, versus realizing I'm the source of my own experience. And so that very short description of how I got into realizing, well, if I change the way I look at things, the things I look at change, as Wayne Dyer said. And one of my favorite quotes by Marcel Proust, he said that the journey of true discovery lies not in finding new lands, but in looking through new eyes. So if I have a particular skill, it's giving people new eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you remember the exact moment where you wanted to, I guess, learn more about this and dive in and help others? Or like, what did that look like? Or what was that moment, that exact moment?
I think there's been a multitude of moments through the course of my life. I feel very blessed that when I went to university or college back in the UK, which itself was an entire arc of my life in terms of being rejected 3 times. I had to take a year off, did some study, then tried to apply again. Eventually, I don't know what possessed me as an 18, 19-year-old. I look back at him and I'm so impressed with his courage that he just called the university, and I sort of pleaded my case for why I should be allowed in, because my dad had died during the last sort of year of my equivalent of high school. So I didn't get the grades I was supposed to get, hence didn't get in. But anyway, that period of going through that was very transformative. But then I met a friend at college when I eventually got in, and they listened to my story, and they realized that I was, justified in calling and explaining that, my words were, as a 19-year-old, I said, I promise you that I'm as good as, if not better than anyone you've already accepted, or something like that. And I was like, yeah, and I was a pretty shy kid, so I'm impressed with myself back then. Anyway, I met a friend who I'm still in touch with now, and we would sit under trees and do the quintessential philosophizing about life and those big questions of why are we here and what's it all about and what does it mean. And so that was a start of this inquiry into what is this crazy human experience that we're all going through. And that perpetuated for many years into reading different books. But the big turning point that was really catalytic in terms of me starting my career was a relationship where I'd fallen head over heels in love with a woman, as best as I knew what love was at the age of 27, 28 or whatever I was. And we had a beautiful relationship, and then she eventually left me about a year and a half later, and I sort of fell apart. And it was during that breakdown that I had my chrysalis moment of the caterpillar eating itself to become the butterfly, where about 8 weeks after she left, I realized that the very nature of life was uncertainty, and during that period I was always looking for certainty, like where is she? Will I see her again? Is she dating someone else? And just the mind wanting to know because it wanted to have fundamentally a feeling of security, which is the paradox of being human, which is life is uncertain, but because we're human, we're looking for certainty. And if you can sort of see the conundrum there, you realize why most people are in a state of fear or dis-ease all the time. So that, when I realized that, and I got the answer to all of those questions simultaneously, like where is she? Is she dating someone? Will I see her again? Will I find love? Like this again, the answer was the same to all of the questions, which is, I don't know. And that I don't know just released me from that very human, for which reason we can have a lot of compassion, but component of survival, like trying to make sure that I was going to be okay. And so that just started my career of seeing the matrix, realizing the illusion that everyone is living in this world of fear that's unfounded. It's all self-generated. And a feeling of freedom came through my body that I'd never experienced before. And of course, there's been many iterations and refinements of that along the way, but that was the big turning point.
Wow. In time, this too shall pass.
Exactly.
My mother always, every breakup in my college years or my 20s, I would think it was the end of the world.
Yeah, of course.
And my mother would be like, give it a month, you'll be over it. And I'm like, no, it's the end of the world. And I was like, I was over it in a month.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it took you, but I just feel like a lot of people can resonate with that, especially with love at a young age in your 20s.
Yeah.
Because instead of taking it as, I'm grateful I had that experience, but I know that it's just part of the journey, and I will meet the next person in my life. It's just getting me to where I need to go with the lessons that I needed to evolve.
Exactly.
You just think the worst.
Yeah.
You're just
absolutely. And when you understand I would say that is the subtext of all relationships. It's really revelatory, right? For us, one of my more popular quotes is that life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free, right? So life is constantly bringing to us that which we need to see where we're still living in some sort of constraint or fear. So relationships, particularly romantic relationships, where we get very bound and attached, they're the greatest catalyst for growth, because they're going to show us where we have become dependent on something externally, as though the exogenous world is where we get our value, our love, our happiness, and it's actually that's the illusion. So you obviously have a wise mother who who knew that and gave you some good counsel. And it's not easy. If you fall in love, you fall in love, and it's going to be what it is. But it's nice to be able to recognize the power of a relationship and even relativity generally, right? Like that. If I always use the example, if I'm lying in bed and it's hot and I move my legs slightly to the side and it's cool, like I can only experience that because of the relative temperatures. And so that to me is this experience of being human, is it's all relationship. And relationships, matters of the heart, tend to be the deepest ones, and that's how we can retrieve these darker shadows and traumas that sometimes we don't even know are there. So yes.
And sometimes it's not even that serious.
No.
We just make it.
None of it is. It's as serious as we make it, right? We are the ultimate obstacle that we're trying to overcome. And because who we are at the deepest level is what we're equally seeking, right? We are that which we seek, and that's sort of very philosophical. But what's in the way of that is the identity we've become misidentified with because we're not enough, we're not loved, we're not whatever. So that's what I help people get beyond.
Yep. It's really nothing, and we make it into this Romeo and Juliet, highly dramatic scene. Yeah. And then you look back and you're like, why did I act that way? Why did I do that? But as you grow, you learn. And so now you have all of the tools. What would you tell younger Peter during that moment of, now that you have all of the tools and you're the mind architect, what would you do to be okay or to get through that moment?
That's a great question. And I definitely have a lot of tools. I'm not sure I have all. I'm still accumulating.
Yeah,
I'm still a work in progress. I'm still a work in progress. I'd honestly, looking back, it's a great question. No one's actually posed that question in that way. I'd look at him and I'd be kind of proud. Like, I think he did a great job. I think he could have avoided a lot of suffering if he had learned more trust, right? So I would have probably, if I was his older brother, father figure or whatever, I would have said, no, first of all, it's okay to be heartbroken. It's okay. It's really a reflection of love, like grief, loss, all of these feelings that we have as humans are really just bedfellows of love, right? So if you can understand, it's kind of beautiful, right, that we have that. And so I would have said it's beautiful that you could feel that much love for somebody, but you felt that much love, meaning the love is in you, is the first thing to recognize. She didn't take it, it wasn't over there with her. She could have been the inspiration for it and the catalyst, but the love fundamentally is his own. I would remind him that hasn't gone anywhere, so you haven't lost anything. And then to just trust that in ways that you don't understand, life is unfolding precisely in the way that is appropriate for you. And so that's not easy just to be able to say it is, but to be able to actually live in the feeling of trust that in ways that we don't understand, life is curating the events that are most appropriate for our own evolution. That takes a big mind to be able to really rest into that and feel it in your body. But I would have given him a big hug and said, I get it, buddy. I've been there. It sucks. Yep. But boy, do I love that you're such a lover. And that shows me who you are. And then just to work on trusting and patience. I think they're the two things that even for myself, I've consistently had to work on, trust and patience.
Yeah, absolutely. And life is funny. Every year just changes so much. You look back, and I tell my younger employees who are Gen Z, mid-20s, early 20s, I'm just like, if they have a breakup, I'm like, you may have several other relationships and live with some guy. Like, you have so much life to live. You're only in your mid-20s. I'm exhausted thinking about it, telling them, because I'm like thinking about my 20s, and I'm like, I had gone through so much. Yeah. Living in 2 major cities, and my boyfriends, and my relationships, and my jobs. So much life to live.
It's never ending, and I think, you look at people who you could say have this quintessential cookie cutter traditional life, married with kids. Even that falls apart so readily, sadly, these days, and they can still move on and find more love or learn whatever they need to. I think for us as human beings, we want security in a dimension that doesn't provide any. If you really get the sort of, again, the paradox of that, and it's hard to be able to really find that inner peace. I love the quote I use. I say, true security is the absence of the need of external security, right? Like, so any relationship, regardless of where it's at, however long you've been, we sort of tend to triumph these and celebrate these long-term relationships. They've been married for 50 years, and which I'm all for. I think it's beautiful, but to what degree did either of them, or maybe both, become cynical and resigned and just went through the process, or stayed together because of the kids, and maybe they're not really, in that spirit of relationship anymore, and they're just going through the motion. So, the relationships are beautiful, and they're hard, and they're revelatory, and they help us see where we're stuck. And I think if people could just understand that, to me, is the ultimate intention of a relationship, is to really grow and evolve. And if you can do that with somebody, that's special.
Yeah, I mean, just being with somebody for 50 years, I give them so much credit because I'm grateful that making this about me, but I feel like I did my 20s right and my 30s right, where I really lived and I focused on my career, but also loved, and I feel like I just had so many experiences, and I'm grateful that I didn't settle down early, I would say, because I will never feel like I resent anybody or my children because I did it all.
Yeah. I mean, listen, kudos to you. I think there's a lot of people who miss out. I was pretty shy. Even at college, I wasn't the guy who was getting out there chasing girls and being drunk. I was a late bloomer, I guess. But I don't think I missed out on anything. But I think anyone who wants a serious relationship would be well served in waiting. I remember working with a spiritual intuitive once, and she said, honestly, if people really want to have a profound relationship, they should wait till their late 50s, early 60s, because it takes that long for us to mature.
You're not wrong.
be adult enough, because otherwise there's just so much dysfunction and disharmony and fighting, because it's really, I don't know, I'm not a burner, but there's this beautiful piece of art that I've seen at Burning Man where it's these two adults who are sitting kind of leaning onto their own knees back to back, because they're sort of sulking or they've had a fight. But inside inside the sculpture, you see these two children who are leaning towards each other. And it's just a beautiful representation of how, the inner person, the real nature of who we are, being love, always wants to be connected. And yet we have these egos where we want to be right and make somebody else wrong. And it's sadly the comeuppance of many relationships. And a lot of people I help with that. But
with the strong personalities, the ego. I find myself, I'm a Taurus, so the ego is just huge, can never be wrong.
Right. And you're a woman.
I will die on this hill.
And you're a woman, so you can never be wrong. It's like, I know. I see it. I do memes on a Sunday that people enjoy just for fun. And I remember one I posted, this man's lying on his back, and the woman is like lying, kneeling beside him, like sort of tending to him. And I think she's on a 911 call or something. She's like, well, what happened? And she said, I told my husband that he was right.
It's the smallest thing where you could just, say, you're right. I'll step down. I was wrong, but no one does it. And it just turns into the longest arguments and negative energy. And we just all need to swallow the pride and say we're wrong.
It's really not a big deal, but I understand it's sort of the imperative of any ego is to be right. Because I would assert, without getting too esoteric, like the nature of the ego is fictitious, and so it has to find evidence to sustain itself. And so being right is an extension of that, right?
Yeah. Relationships are funny, but I just think people have fun. Don't overthink it. Take it day by day.
Yeah.
Don't hope for the future. Don't think about the future.
Yeah.
And just live in the moment. And I mean, life is so short that people just need to start enjoying it. And relationships, I think, get in people's heads too much or timelines and oh my gosh, especially women. It's just have fun. Go do something that you enjoy with the people that you love and that bring you positive energy, right? That's all you can do.
If you can do it, great. Amen to that. But I think, being human, especially these days, has become increasingly complex. And
well, that's why we have you, to rework our minds, to rewire them.
I don't think I'll ever be without work. That's, I guess, at one level a blessing, or maybe a curse. I don't know. But yes, I'm trying to free as many minds as I can so people can live in that way. I feel like being free and living in love and possibility. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I didn't even plan on talking about relationships, but I loved that little veer that we had. I didn't know that was, just part of the reason of why you got into all of this. And so I found that really interesting. And I mean, there's so many people who are just drowning and breakup and overthinking and it's the end of the world and they're not focusing on their career. And I think everyone needs help in that department. I don't care who you are or how strong you are or how important you are.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs support on how to navigate through heartbreak.
For sure. I think it's, as I said, life is relationship. We only know ourselves through relationship, right? If it was only Sam on the planet, you wouldn't, who are you relative to what, right? So I think, again, without getting too deep, consciousness, given that I would say is the foundation of who we are, like call it spirit, soul, that's where we're all connected. So we can call that oneness. But oneness doesn't have an experience of itself because it's everything, right? So it's only through diversity and through separation, or the illusion of separation, that we get to relate. So it's a beautiful system if you look at it, right? Like what we're all looking for is love, which we could say is synonymous with unity. That's consciousness. But the only way we can find it is by pretending to be separate for a minute so that we can fall in love and come back to unity. So that's sort of my understanding of the game of being human. But that's why it's so devastating, because really we are connected, but then we feel we're not when we break up with someone. And that really, to me, is probably the biggest contributing factor to suffering, is when you feel you're separate from source, you're going to suffer.
And you carry that. You know, when I was watching your videos, just a lot of our present day, I guess, blockages are from past traumas, right? So you had that really bad breakup in your 20s or high school, and you carry that with you.
Yeah.
And you can't have a real love or love yourself until you're able to remove that block, right?
Yeah, to break free. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Carl Jung had a beautiful quote. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate, right? So that's that victim mindset, that I don't know the things that are driving my deeper conditioning that have me think, feel, and act the way that I do, that creates the results I have. And so when you bring that unconscious conscious, you can look at it, and that's healing, right? It's like, oh my gosh, from age 5, I've always thought I wasn't good enough, or from age 8, I always felt like I wasn't wanted by my family, and that's why in relationships somebody attracts somebody who's very dismissive or disrespectful or, God forbid, abusive. And to start to see, oh, it's my deep conditioning that is driving the outcomes, versus trying to change behavior to get different outcomes, right? That's what most people do. They look at, oh, I got to do something differently, and not that that's inaccurate, but it's insufficient, right? So until you get to the deeper programming of our actual personality and identity, you're sort of hitting your head up against the wall. So that's a bit that I like to do, is help people break free from these internal prisons.
Yeah. And would you say it's you there's not an end to the healing? It's an everyday.
Yeah.
Until you die, you're working on yourself.
I think until you got to the point that you're walking on water, it's probably something you could be working on.
It's not like you work on it once and you're good to go. It's an everyday practice.
And especially for the deeper ones, right? Like I know for myself, I've been doing this forever, and I'd say I'm sort of at the bow of the boat of human potential as a thought leader in my arena, but I'm still human. I'm still processing stuff. I still have things to learn and integrate. So it is a never-ending prophecy, but I think, there's just different levels to it, right? So it's like when I work with my athletes, like if I work with someone who's a professional golfer, his awareness of the contact and the way that he or she can control ball flight and distance and spin, it's mastery. Versus I go to a driving range with someone who's never picked up a golf club before. They're just trying to hit the ball, right? So it's a different way of perceiving and relating to their circumstance. So the same for anybody who's in the realm of conscious evolution and spiritual growth, and there's going to be different levels, right? So somebody who truly thinks they're a victim of, their mom or their dad, they're assholes, and their wife is a bitch, or their husband's and whatever, or their boss is a dick, and that whole world is a very low vibration in the way that people are still stuck in not recognizing their own power. Versus you meet someone who hopefully has done a ton of work, and they're like, they could still get upset if somebody particularly close to them says something derogatory or dismissive, but it doesn't have the same impact. So it is, constant mastery. I always say we're masterpieces and works in progress. Until
the end.
Yeah. And then you probably get the answer right at the end. You're like, damn it, why the fuck did I try so hard? I don't know.
Yeah. But at least, you have the tools. So if you ever see yourself slipping, or you feel like you're going into old habits, then you know how to sort of snap back.
Yes.
To I'm Samantha, I got this, you
Yeah.
know, and just feeling confidence within yourself no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's just something that comes with time and age and maturity, and that's why, you know, we have patience with kids because they don't know any better, and there's a degree of compassion, I think, that can be continued from that even to adults, and we don't know where we're stuck if it's a blind spot, right? And I always say you can't be held oblivious for that which you can't be held accountable for that which you're oblivious to, right? And that just rather than judging people and pointing fingers and criticizing it, I think it opens us up to being more compassionate as humans to each other. That, okay, you might see a 40, 50-year-old adult and there's an assumption that they should know better, the way they drive in front of you or the fact that they're smoking or whatever they're doing. But there's obviously deeper programming that they're not so aware of that maybe warrants a little bit more patience and compassion. So that's where I always try to come from.
That resonates.
Yeah.
I think that resonates with your, you know, with your parents or family or just anyone that you know who's older. When you're young, you feel like the older generation has it all figured out.
Yeah.
When I became an adult,
Yeah.
I was like, my parents do not have it figured out.
No.
I just
No.
always assumed, but they're just as lost as
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
I think you're always a little lost. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Even your grandparents, no
Yeah.
one has it together.
No, for sure. As long as we're in human form, I'm pretty certain we can categorically say we're all fucking clueless.
Yeah, I hope that resonates with everybody because I remember becoming a certain age where I'm an adult.
Yeah.
I know right from wrong. I'm
Yeah.
wiser. And then I would look at my parents and
Yeah.
or grandparents and I'm just like, they are no different than me.
Yeah.
They're still making mistakes.
Yeah.
They do not have it together.
No, not at all. And that's where I said it breeds compassion, right?
Yeah.
That we are all doing the best we can from within the sort of realm of awareness that we have,
Yeah.
right? Because people often will beat themselves up about woulds and shoulds and coulds and, oh, I should have done this or you should have done that. And to me, it's just such a futile conversation because the version of who you were 3-5 years ago that you made a choice that you can now be berating or sort of feeling the consequences of with shame and guilt, that's all the data you had at that point, right? So it becomes a futile way of reinforcing self-judgment versus I did the best I could with whatever level of like awareness I had. That's it, you know? And if people could give themselves that grace and forgiveness, I think they would not only feel more at peace within themselves, but it would make for a better world where people aren't just walking around hurting one another because they're still carrying a lot of their own hurt.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of that, especially on social media these days. I see a lot of people on TikTok just bullying each other.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I know that everyone's going through it, and
Yeah.
people just need to be kinder with one another. You
Yes,
know, keep it
that-
to yourself. You
yes.
can think whatever you want. Just let them live their life and make mistakes and
Yeah, no
go about
judgment.
their journey.
No
Yeah.
judgment. But it's tough because people, again, hurt people is a very common expression. And
Yep.
people who carry self-judgment tend to be very judgmental. You know, it's just a mirror, right? So wherever I am, there I go. And the way that I relate to myself is typically the way that we relate to others. So for me, it's helping people find true self-love and acceptance because then that's what they naturally will start to afford other people.
Yep, absolutely. And so I know you touched on working with athletes.
Yeah.
Was that a fun sort of pivot? How did you get into that?
I loved it. I still do. I still love, because as an athlete myself, I
Yeah.
love sports and the realm of competition, being a boy, a man. And
It's a cool industry.
it is. It's huge. And then nowadays with professional athletes, there's so much at stake, right? There's millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I have actually a cool meeting with the GM of a big sports team tomorrow, so it's fun. And especially for me in terms of performance and recognizing at the highest level, the differentiating factor tends to be mindset, because the athletes themselves have done what they've done from the age of 3 or 5. They've got all the skill, they have the physical prowess, they have the talent, but it's usually in the way that they perceive themselves, how they interact, how they communicate, and how they relate to their future, whatever they're working towards. Like, are they living in fear? They're trying to avoid something, striking out, missing a free throw, missing the cut, not making it to the Olympics or whatever it is, or are they stepping into a future that they're inspired by? So I love it. To answer your question, I got into it back in 20 years ago now with my first athlete was a professional golfer on the PGA Tour, just one of those somebody knows somebody, and his caddy happened to know a friend of mine who was impacted by my work. He was a triathlete who I'd helped him with some stuff, and he said, would you talk to this golfer? And I was like, sure. So our first tournament, he came third, which was a big deal, made a big nice prize money. And he's like, well, let's give this a go. And so within 2 years, we tripled his winnings, and then that just opened the floodgates of all these other golfers and LPGA golfers, women. And then I got a contract with a Major League Baseball team, and then my baseball players were getting traded all over the place. So I had players from the Yankees to the Dodgers and the Giants and the Rockies and the Reds and all over. I think there was one year I had 18 teams, or a player on 18 teams, which was crazy. Then that opened up to other things. A couple of basketball players in the NBA. I had a show jumper who competed in the World Equestrian Games, won a gold medal, and it's just super fun.
So what holds them back from being the most successful athlete? You're saying they're in their head, or they're not thinking that they're worthy of it or good enough to win?
Yeah, sort of iterations of that. I think we all tend to be in our head. That's where that's the main locus of our attention, is like we're thinking about something. It's just the nature of the thinking, the quality of the thinking, right? So if I worked with an NBA guy who had the worst free throw shooting average, right? The average is about 75%. He was about 37%. And so his thinking was, I don't want to miss, right? Because he's being informed, as we all are, by a history that hurt, right? One of my quotes, you probably heard, I write in quotes, and I say, past hurt informs future fear. So wherever we've had disappointments, trials, and tribulations, that tends to then inform the brain, which is designed to predict and protect and make us survive, of what we don't want to happen again, because that sucked and it hurt, right? It's logical, right? If something didn't work, we're talking about relationships, you get your heart broken, the next relationship someone goes into, they're probably going to be a bit more guarded because they don't want to get hurt again. But really what they're doing is they're carrying and perpetuating their history versus actually focusing on their future. So with him, I turned it around. I said, okay, well, you're trying not to miss, which is you trying to heal your history, but can you change your history? No. Well, what if I told you that for the rest of the season you shoot league average? And his face lit up. He's like, that would be amazing, right? The relief that he felt. And I'm like, well, that future that I just presented is as real as the one you're worried about. Because at this point we were still sitting in his kitchen, right? So it's like, it's recognizing that the power of the mind and the way that it fulfills on invariably the things that we are actually trying to avoid. That's the madness of being human, and why most people suffer and they need to have a drink at the end of the night or talk to a doctor and get a prescription or whatever it is. So that's why I love it, and helping athletes see that they are typically, like most humans, trying to avoid a bad future that hasn't happened yet, which is a reflection of a history that they haven't fully accepted.
Yeah.
And when you get that, it's very powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you have a new client, and you said you were in the kitchen,
so
is it almost like a therapy session? Like, let's dig deep. Let's find the root of this.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. I'm not a licensed therapist, and I think therapy is awesome, and people do a lot of work to get to that place. But I don't hand out drugs. I don't write prescriptions. I'm
getting to the root of it.
Yes.
And then once he goes out there and plays again, what are the practices and tools that you provide him with to
They typically are a byproduct of looking at a different future, right? So we as human beings tend to think that who we are is a byproduct of everything we've been through. That just makes sense. Like who Samantha is because of all the things you've gone through. And that's a component. But time, I get into the real physics of existence, right? So Einstein said that the distinctions of past, present, and future are nothing but a persistent illusion, right? So they only exist in language and in our head. You've never been in your past, and you'll never be in your future. You're always going to be where you are. So past and future only occur in language, right? So what I'm helping people to do is, my catchphrase is, I don't solve problems, I dissolve them. So I'm removing the obstacle which allows the natural extension or the practice of being a different human who's no longer bound by something that they couldn't overcome, right? So they're no longer being constrained by a history that was littered with disappointments and failures, which we all have, right? As I said, like if you feel that you're free to step forward into a future that you're inspired by, and even more powerfully, if you consciously speak that into existence, manifestation, or I love the word abracadabra. I don't know if you know, like from magic, abracadabra, its actual translation is as I speak, so I create. Ooh. Isn't that cool? So
I've never heard anyone use that, but I'm going to start.
Isn't that powerful?
That word,
yeah, so we're all magicians. So as we speak, so we create. If we say, oh, this is too good to be true, as a sort of a flippant remark as to whether it's you in a relationship or a job opportunity or somebody else who got good fortune, you're unconsciously but in a very powerful, unfortunately disempowering way, speaking a reality into existence that you don't necessarily really want, right? That goes back to the ego wanting to be right about itself. See, I told you that would never last. Well, so now you gave up something that your heart wanted, but your mind can at least be right about. Like, you start to see the absolute insanity of how people would rather be right than be free or happy. And so the practice, what they do is, yes, they'll feel different physiologically. We might work on some breathing patterns to help them slow down, especially if they're an athlete, because then when you're in the heat of battle and you're performing, physiology tends to shift a lot. But more than anything, having a different lens to look through, actually being a different person who's more at peace, not worried about the outcome, they know how to perform. They've been doing it for 20, 30 years usually. Like, their body unconsciously knows how to hit a baseball, shoot a free throw, throw a football or hit a golf ball, whatever it is. Like, that's ingrained. So it's actually removing what would be the static or the interference because of the mind worrying about something. So it's a slightly different approach. Why I say I don't solve problems, I dissolve them, as I said earlier.
It's so true, though. I feel like I have constant arguments with my thoughts.
Yes.
When you have the negativity and you're like, shut up, Samantha, go back. It's like two people fighting in your mind.
Yeah.
So you're like, I don't want to speak that or think that into existence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I've had some battles with my thoughts because, you start thinking negatively just because of past traumas or situations,
absolutely.
Experiences. And then you have the other person who's like pushing him out of your thoughts.
Yeah.
Nope, we're positive here. All is well. You're deserving of this.
Yeah. So the one reframe that might help you is to make space for both.
Cool.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, because we tend to live in this dualistic world of zeros and ones where it's good, bad, right, wrong, up, down. And that's the way we interact with life. But I would assert there's a bigger world that's available to us where you can make space for both, right? So the part of you that's more aspirational, inspirational, and driven by what you're calling positive. But there's also going to be Samantha's ego, little girl, who is based in dependency and fear, that's going to have the derogatory comments or the fear-based energies. And if you can recognize they're both appropriate, and then you have real choice. Otherwise, it's an either or, and we flip-flop. It's like, oh, that's okay. That's the part of me that got hurt, got scared, got let down. Mum said this, dad did this, ex-boyfriend said that. And that's okay, but I'm choosing not to be informed by that versus trying to get rid of it.
Okay.
Right? I use quotes. I say the person trying to get rid of the ego is the ego.
Okay.
Could take a while,
So
right?
we keep her around. We don't have to get rid of her.
She's a sweetheart. She's so sweet. She did the best she could. She was adorable. She was dependent. She was at times inadequate and weak, and because she was a child. And when you realize that, it's adorable, right? It's where you start to see your humanity and go, oh, there's a part of me that can be really scared or was really hurt, and that's okay. I don't need to be informed by that, but I can let it be there. Just like if I were to say, do you have any scar on your body, right? Just by virtue of being a woman, a girl, a human. I know for me as boys, we have scars from playing soccer and sports, and but whether you have a small one on your hip or your knee or wherever, you didn't think of the word, or you didn't think of the scar until I actually said the word scar. So it's there, it's integrated, you didn't have to get rid of it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right? So it's the same with our inner child. It's like it can be there, integrated, but we don't let it define us.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a much more holistic and much bigger being that we can see ourselves to be, that we can make space for all of it.
Yeah. To not battle your thoughts, but keep them both sides around and just be more in control of your thoughts or
more discerning in the way you choose the ones you want to believe. It's like listening to a radio show, right? If you've got the radio on all day and you're pottering around the house, cleaning, doing whatever, emptying a closet, spring cleaning, there's going to be certain things that you gravitate towards. It's an interesting topic, and there's going to be a lot of noise, like ads or when someone's just bullshitting about something. You can hear it, but you tune out a bit. It can be there, but I'm going to focus on the things that I'm inspired by. Same with our own 24/7 radio show.
Okay. I love that. I'm glad we had this conversation because I've been in a constant, it's like almost like the movie Split where it's like, no, let me see the light, like the positive Samantha, not the old traumas and negative experiences. But I'm just going to keep all of our personalities around.
Perfect. And that's why I wanted to offer that to you, because I could see that in your makeup, right? There would be a bit of a tendency towards trying to get it right, or perfectionism, or wanting only the good stuff. And, it's like I can remember doing a workshop many, many years ago. And some people came up to me at the end, and this girl, you know, who I could tell was, whether she was flirting or just trying to be impressive, I don't know. I could just read the energy, right? And she's like, no, like I'm going to go to India next week or month and da-da-da. And I was like, okay, well, good luck, you know. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you're going to be there, right? It's like, India's not going to resolve all your problems, right? It was tongue in cheek. And then someone else had said, yeah, anything's possible. And I'm like, yeah, you could get cancer next week. And they're like, what? I'm like, you said anything's possible. Isn't that anything? And they're like, yeah, but that's not what I meant. Oh, you meant just good things are possible? Right? So it's just a way of checking people to, like, we tend to obviously gravitate to wanting everything to work out, but that's not life, you know? Like, this is a rich tapestry of all frequencies from quote unquote dark to light. And I think the opportunity as a human is to be so big that you can make space for anything to show up and not be affected.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know how powerful your mind is. And when I was starting to get into spirituality and manifesting, and I was just like, oh my God, my mind is so powerful. I cannot think anything, or else it'll, like if you're in a new relationship and you're like, he's talking to girls, I'm like, then he's going to talk to girls. I just thought it into existence.
Exactly.
So I would sort of psych myself out.
Yeah.
But now I'm just like, everyone can stay. I just, you know, what's meant to be will always be, right? Can't
it's more
really
expansive, isn't it? It's more liberating. Yeah, and I think just again for you and the listeners, like it's not so much what we think, it's you want to pay attention to the feeling that comes with it, right? So he's talking to girls is just noise. But what does that elicit from a feeling for Samantha, right? It's going to be a contraction, it's going to be a fear, it's going to be a worry. So it's the frequency that we embody in our physicality that's really the manifestation. It's not the thought itself. The thought is just noise. But who we be in our frequency and the vibration we carry by virtue of the thinking is what starts to impact life.
Yeah, absolutely. And to just, what I hear is to just find confidence within yourself. You know, if it's work or relationships or whatever it may be, just know you are worthy of that love or the job or travel. And so that is, you know, enough to get the noise out.
Yes.
You know, maybe he's talking to girls or I'm not worthy of this job. No, you are worthy. You're worthy of everything. Yeah. People just need to remind themselves that.
And it's not even that you're worthy of the job, but I'm worthy, period.
Period.
Because maybe that job isn't right. Maybe that is for 3 months and there's something better for you, right? So it's, again, it's staying centered within the experience of ourself versus collapsing it with something outside of us, right? Like, I'm worthy of this job. Well, now you're attached to the job. There's no freedom there. But I'm worthy, period, then let's see what shows up. Or I'm in love with this person. That certainly can happen, and they can be the catalyst to discover the love that you are. But I'm love. Like, I was on a podcast early in my career, and I said, I'm in love. And, you know, that would normally elicit someone say, oh, that's great, congratulations, who with? And I'm like, no, I'm in love, right? I'm in the essence of love.
Yeah.
And then that's the precursor to being attractive, not necessarily even romantically, but to life. So we tend to become very collapsed and attached to and associated with a thing, a person, a circumstance, as though that's where the experience is. No, that could be the catalyst for me to experience me, but I'm the generator of that experience. So if I stay there, I'm worthy, then even if this job, relationship doesn't work out, but the worthiness hasn't gone anywhere, then I will be the precursor to worthiness showing up in another form.
Yeah.
But it's very seductive. We tend to get attached to the form of something versus utilizing the form as a reflection of the energy that we're emitting.
And saying, I am in love or I am loved. Do you believe in affirmations? And do affirmations not work if your mind isn't connected?
I don't know if I'm not a fan. Like, I don't know if I know. I just feel they tend to be sort of Band-Aids, right? It's if someone's using an affirmation, it typically, not always, is a strategy to overcome a deeper resistant thought, right? So, oh, I am worthy is usually they're saying it because they've heard someone on TikTok, Instagram, or a friend say, oh, you know, do an affirmation. But it's usually as a reaction to the fact they're not feeling very good about themselves right now. What's more potent to me is to sit with the I'm not feeling very good about myself, make space for it, because then you're developing love and acceptance of that part of you, which makes you very worthy. Because if you can sit with a friend who's not feeling good about themselves, you're a good friend, right? So your value, your stock goes up because you're holding space for someone. So if you can do that with yourself and your feeling of worthlessness, then you're actually, ironically, it's a paradox, right? If I can sit with my feeling of aloneness, then I don't feel alone. If I can sit with my feeling of I'm not enough, I'm enough to sit with that, right? So, yeah, it's very subtle, but so affirmations, have at it. I'm not going to judge anyone. But if you're doing it from a place of inadequacy, then you're actually reinforcing the lack versus what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just imagine just people standing in the mirror and just saying it 100 times over,
Yeah.
or writing in a notebook. But at the end of the day, you can write it and say it, but if you don't believe it,
And
will
feel it.
be-
Yeah.
and
and
feel
that's
it.
and that's why, again, I think, powerful declaration of words, going back to abracadabra, I'm all a fan for. It's like, okay, if I declare that this is what I'm going to accomplish, or this is who I'm going to be in the world in the next 6 months, like, okay, now, great, stick to your word. That's power, right? Where as I speak, so I create. Now employ the actions consistently until you get that outcome. That's awesome. But if I'm using words to try and compensate for a deeper feeling of other words about myself that aren't particularly flattering, now I'm just kidding myself, right? So it's subtle. All of this stuff is, being human is pretty subtle. But hopefully that helps people to realize nothing wrong with affirmations, but if they're really from a place of nothing, if I'm literally making up that I am the most extraordinary human being on the planet, like if that's something completely declared out of zero reaction to anything, that's powerful. If I'm saying that because I feel like I'm a piece of shit, then I'm actually reinforcing that I don't feel good about myself.
Yeah.
So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like just saying something over and over and over again, it's just, I don't know, it seemed silly to me because, well, first of all, I'm a firm believer that what's meant to be will always be, and you can't really change it by writing something down. But energy is so powerful. So,
Yes.
I mean, it's definitely a gray area.
Yeah.
But you may really want a job or that relationship or feel you're worthy of something, but the universe already knows where you're meant to end up.
Yes, and energy goes back to what I said about like the feeling, the vibration, and the frequency that is underneath the words versus the words themselves. So even the affirmation, if someone's saying it as a reaction to something that they don't feel good about themselves, then they're in the feeling of not feeling good about themselves, and then they're just making noise. Right?
Yeah.
So again, I want to keep bringing people back to how does this feel? Because it's in our body that we're actually relating to life, attracting people and circumstances, not just our words.
Yep.
Words are just sound, right? Blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Right? So it's taking it a notch lower and deeper into our emotional body, and then actually how that feels in our tissues, because that's where we're going to be functioning from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought the same thing. So I'm glad that I heard that from you too about the affirmation.
Good. Different form of affirmation. Confirmation.
Yeah, exactly. Abracadabra, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So I know you also work with a lot of leaders,
Yes.
and I wanted to end the podcast. Obviously, I am a leader,
Yeah.
and I had told you that I've done hypnotherapy just because I know how powerful my mind is, and I want to make sure that I'm taking care of myself,
Yeah.
my energy, my health, because I know that will be reflected in my success and my growth on this earth, my evolution.
Yeah.
And I remember going in and he's like, what do you want to work on? Thinking that I wanted to quit smoking or, the typical things. And I'm like, I don't know. I just want to be really successful and wealthy.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, I mean, let's get into it. So you working with leaders, I'm sure they come to you and just say, maybe they don't even have an issue. They just say, I want to remove blockages to become more successful in my craft or wealthier, happier.
Yes.
And what does that work look like? And I know that you're like, how long do you have?
Right.
But the top line version of that.
Definitely. There's a lot that can be covered just in that one arena of corporations and leadership. I think for you, one thing that you could look at is even if you say, I'm a leader, right? So that might seem like a powerful declaration, but I'd say you're what's before being a leader, right? So being a leader, because that might be something you do for the next 20, 30 years, and then you might not. And then you might be a mum, or you might be a wife, or there's different ways that we can sort of categorize ourselves. And I would invite you to look at who are you before all of those monikers and labels, right? Because if who you are as a leader, what I hear is you're somebody who really cares. You're somebody who wants to make a difference. You're somebody who wants to live in a world of abundance and wealth, as you said. And so leadership is really maybe just the means by which you access that. But again, it's like if I'm a wife and then you're a wife and you're connected to somebody, that can be beautiful, but it can be a limitation, right? So the first thing I look at when I'm working with a leader is like, what are the words they're using that categorize themselves in a way that could be some sort of constraint, right? So there's nothing wrong with saying I'm a leader, but it's going to be contaminated with meaning, right? That you may have some assumptions of what you should do, the responsibilities, I'm supposed to act a certain way. And so very subtly, you're building this argument for limitation. Does that make sense? Versus if who you are, Samantha, is I'm a loving, philanthropic, abundant being, right? And so, yeah, does that make more sense, right? Or at least resonates more, right?
Yeah.
And so if you function from that place, not only do you get to express that through the characteristics of a leader, but as a daughter, as a girlfriend, as a friend. So I like to come back to these more impersonal qualities. Like for me, I'm a space of total freedom, love, and possibility, right? I want to ooze unconditional love. Like that's, and you could say, oh, but you're Peter and you're the mind architect. Right, but that's smaller than I'm just a space of unconditional love into which people can say anything they like, right? So that's vast, right?
Yeah.
So I would invite you to recognize, yes, leadership and leading is one of the things you do, but it's because of who you are.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the way you put it sounds more human than
Yes.
I am a leader. Like,
Right. Exactly. It's a little robotic, isn't it? It's a little
Yeah.
stiff, you know? No, you're a
Like,
beautiful woman
yeah.
who cares, who wants to make a difference, who loves to touch people's lives, be of service, and simultaneously lead an inspiring life that you are fulfilled with, right? Like I'm just making this literally up, but that's different than I'm a leader,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
So that's what I invite people to look at is these sort of qualities of being a human. What is the essence that you want to bring in your relationship, in your leadership, in your performance, in your sport, whatever it is. And then if you tap into that, it just opens things up that informs the way that you lead, but it's not bound by the quote unquote, you know, top 10 ways that you lead, right? It's like,
Yep.
yeah.
Like a Forbes article.
Yeah, which I'm sure there are plenty of. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just tapping into the essence of who you are before being a leader.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that.
Good.
And as, you know, somebody who is a business owner, entrepreneur, to rework their mind to just always, I guess, constantly grow. Because I feel like I'm never using the word leader again. Some entrepreneurs, I feel like it's like a no-no word now. Some entrepreneurs feel a little stagnant in their growth, and is reworking their mind going to unblock that stagnant period.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what allows that, right? So if we look at, I make a distinction between being reactive and creative. So if you declare yourself, which apparently you're never going to do again, which is that you're a leader, you know, that could inspire a reactive mindset. Like, if I'm a leader, I have to do this. And if you don't do that, well, the reaction to that is guilt and shame or embarrassment, right? That I'm not doing it right. But creative is more like childlike. It's more like I'm going to make this up, pure imagination. It informs all the things that I do. Like I'm loving, I'm fun, I'm playful, I'm inspiring. So these creative essences, these energies that are based in more what I would consider to be the natural state of a human being, can then be funneled through the different ways that we actually conduct ourselves in life, right? It's not, oh, I'm a leader, therefore I'm going to be a good listener. No. I'm a fucking great listener, which I can then bring to my leadership, I can bring to my relationships, I can bring to my friends. So we want to look at the quality of the characteristic first and let that inform whatever particular role we're playing at the time.
Wow. I mean, that's so true. Of just, the leader, entrepreneur, it's just so serious, whereas we have so many more beautiful qualities about ourselves that got us to where we are, and we need to remember that.
Yeah, it's the cart before the horse, right? Yeah, because otherwise it's also being a mother, right? You think about someone who is a mother, and I have so much reverence for the feminine because sadly we live in a world where for centuries women have been abused. Hopefully it's getting a little better, but although if you watch the Olympics, apparently not. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic.
Or Blake Lively's new movie is about domestic violence too.
It's just, it's insane. But anyway, so particularly I have so much respect and admiration for mothers in ways that I'll never fully understand what a mother's capable of as a man. But I think if you look at even that role of being a mother, there's so much pressure that a woman will put on herself to be a mother versus default back to, no, you're a sensitive, sentient being. whose capacity to love, and particularly through the body of a woman, is insane resilience, right? If that's who you be, and then you bring that to the doing of motherhood, it's a totally different proposition, right? Otherwise, you're going to come back to that guilt and shame. It's like, no, just look at your capacity to love. Look at your capacity to care. Look at your capacity to want to make a difference.
Yep.
That, for me, then is a way more inspiring way to apply those qualities to whichever arena of life you want. Like, they can go everywhere. They're not just limited to motherhood, because then maybe you're a wife, but, you know, you could be a bitch to your husband. It's like, well, but those same qualities of being loving and kind and caring can infuse every role that you play.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I like to default to, it's like the old be, do, have. I'm sure many people have heard that, right? Like, people want to have money so they can do what they want and be happy. I'm like, no, you be happy, you do what you love, and you'll have all the money you need.
So true. I mean, a lot of people get the money and then they're still not happy, right? So
correct, because who they're
from
being
within.
is still fucking tied into this world of I'm not enough and no one gives a shit about me, you know, and that's maybe why they made money, to try and compensate as a reaction, but it never solved anything because they're still living in the world of that no one actually loves them or they're not good enough, right? So we're human beings, not human doings, right? So being a leader is a doing, but being a loving, caring woman who can then infuse the doing of leadership, that gives rise to different havings.
Oh, I love that line. That was good.
Feel free to use it. It's your podcast.
Yeah. I was like, so true.
Yeah.
And to just be okay and to stop wanting more. Do you agree that as humans, we just always want more and more and more, better, to be better, to do better, to just be like okay with where we are?
It's incessant. And that's being driven by the fact that the ego lives in the world of scarcity and lack, right? So if you look at any infomercial, which I fortunately haven't done for decades now, but you know, if I remember back in the day, and I'm sure they're still the same, it's like, wait, there's more. If you're the first 100 callers, you get the free toaster or whatever the fuck it is, right? It's appealing to the fact that as human beings looking through the lens of inadequacy, we are going to come from a feeling of scarcity. And so that feels like that's going to be placated and taken care of by having more outside of us. No, there's nothing missing in me. I am everything I'm looking for. Sure, it's nice to have things and to grow and a bigger business, bigger home. All of these things are fun, but that's the realm of exploration and creativity, not because I'm missing anything. So the more it's an addiction, because all you're doing is reinforcing the lack that is your own relationship to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and that it comes to play with money too. What would you tell a client who has that scarcity mindset of money? And you know those people who are a little more frugal, and you think maybe they didn't have money in a past life. You're like, what is bringing this to your current life that you're so scarce with money and you don't want to spend, and you're so focused on your savings? How do you sort of rework to welcome more money into your life in abundance?
You look at what money represents, right? Like for a lot of people, it's security. For a lot of people, it's the word you just used, abundance, or this feeling of prosperity. For a lot of people, it's a feeling of possibility. So come back to the feelings, right? Like, so if you realize, for the most part, unless people are in horrific situations, they're caged or they're in jail, like we are free to do what we want, right? Like, it may not be in a luxurious way, but if someone wants to walk from here to Arizona, and they can, if they want to move, that, you know, we are, by virtue of being sovereign beings, we're sort of fundamentally free. Yes, we can't all live very, as I said, expensive lifestyles, but so come back to these qualities of who we are and realize that if people are struggling in the world of money, that they're typically going to be relating to themselves with some form of worthlessness or lack of self-value, and to find where those narratives got created or started when we were kids, that, you know, kids are to be seen and not heard, right? Where kids are told to go to their bedroom, and what was that experience? Or your brother was the better athlete, or your sister was a greater academic, and so that informed that child that, well, I'm not as good as, or I'm not as special as. And so people have got all of these dialogues that really speak to a lack of self-worth, which as a mirror to life energetically has to manifest usually either as the compensation, right? So if somebody doesn't think they're valuable, they'll work even harder to compensate for that, and they'll make a lot of money, but they don't feel rich, you know? Or somebody just buys right into it where I don't have self-worth, and so they actually manifest that in the way that they have a job that doesn't really match what they think is their value in the marketplace, right? It's all a mirror. Like when you get up in the morning and you step in front of the mirror, you don't see a 6-foot blonde dude. You know, it's like, right? I mean, maybe behind you. And it depends whatever you did. That's none of my business. But you get the point. It's like you're seeing a reflection of yourself, and life is the ultimate mirror, right? Where we get to see who are we in the way that we relate to ourselves, and that's what's reflected in life. So if somebody's struggling financially, or they're struggling in their own personal wealth and their financial freedom, then that's going to correlate directly to some way that they relate to themselves and their own absence of true self-value.
Yep. I mean, it all comes back to
Always.
the self.
Such a pain in the butt. It's like I just can't keep pointing at life. I've got to look at myself. Yeah.
Always. Yeah. Love, career, wealth, health.
All of the big buckets. Yeah. It's all me, which is great, you know, because at the end of the day, if you really are a victim of life, like it's my dad, it's my husband, it's my boss, or it's my wife. Like if that's really what's creating your suffering, that's a miserable way to live life, right? Because then you're saying other people, other circumstances have power over me. Then I don't want to live that game.
Yeah.
I mean, I can get bamboozled by it sometimes. I can feel like, oh, I'm upset because of the circumstance, but that's not a truth.
Yeah.
So I don't, you know, for me personally, I want to recognize I'm free. And for that reason, I'm 100% responsible for everything I feel.
Can only control yourself and your feelings and your reactions. That's one that I've been learning as I get older too.
Yeah.
Don't react.
Yeah.
It's all well. It's all is well. It's meant to be.
Yeah. And even your reaction, you could argue to a certain degree is revealing something, right? If it's a strong reaction, okay, there's a sore spot. Something got hit there that's a little tender, right? If it's no reaction, okay, that's something I've worked through. So even that can be very informative in the way that I can see, as I said earlier, where am I still not free? And that's the opportunity. That's the gift of other people in life, is to touch these spots so that I can go, oh, okay, here's an opportunity to recognize that I'm still neglecting to remember my divine nature that can handle everything.
Yeah. And the growth. I mean, that's the coolest thing, at least for me with reacting, because I think younger Samantha, I'd react to everything.
Yes.
I wouldn't take a beat and think about it.
Yeah.
But now, current Samantha, like, you can't upset me. You say this, do that, all is well.
That's a beautiful place to be, not only for the people around you, because you don't make them feel bad, but for your own peace of mind, and that cascades into your body, and that's what we call health, right?
Yep.
Dis-ease, and the way it shows up in the body is, you know, precisely that, the absence of ease that eventually cascades, and we become sick with disease, you know. So to be at peace, to me, is really the epitome of success.
I mean, it's so true. No stress, longevity.
Yeah.
People love that word these days. So
yeah, I'm going to a longevity dinner tonight.
No, stop it.
No, really, I've been invited to contribute. And
longevity dinner.
Yes, I mean, it's for a group that's committed to whatever's the cutting edge in longevity. Because
I mean, it's a cool thing. I'm just
it
kidding.
is,
but I feel like it's such a commonly used word now. We can't say anti-aging. I had someone on the podcast last week, and I said anti-aging, longevity.
Yes,
like, you're right.
Yeah, because anti-anything, like anti-war and anti-depressant, and you know, like it's against something, it's a reaction. But I love, you know, I spoke at a biohacking conference I've done for the last few years, and you know, I make a bold statement. I say you can't access true vitality unless you free your mind. And so a lot of people are now realizing they can do all the peptides and the hot cold therapies and, you know, PMFs and whatever they're doing, like, which is great. And I'm all for it. And I have all the toys myself. I even have a hyperbaric chamber, but it's, you know, but I also work with a lot of people who have all the toys, but they're still in a state of anxiety, depression, anger, frustration. And so that's the real access to vitality, is our emotional body.
Wow, I mean, it's so true. I almost am like leaving this excited to continue freeing my mind.
Great.
And growing as just a being.
Yeah, good.
And you see that naturally, just aging, right?
Yeah.
Year after year, decade after decade. But the more you work on it, it's just cool to see who you've become and how you handle everything.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It
is. That's our own sort of evolution, right? That's why we're here. For me, the human journey is not, as I said earlier, to accumulate all these things, but really to tap into our own spiritual awakening.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I loved this conversation. I will link all of your stuff. But
Great.
what do you have? What's exciting happening in your life? What do you
Lots
have going
of things.
on?
I mean, by the
I don't
time
think
this,
you sleep.
Yes, I did have a period actually in my life where I wasn't, and it was because I was too excited about all the possibilities. So
A yes man to everything.
I just love life, you know, and I was like, sleep's sort of getting in the way of these limitless possibilities. But so I do have a lot of things coming up. By the time this comes out, sadly, most people will probably miss my mastermind because that comes out on the 24th. Yes.
I did my research. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So
I was like thinking about signing up. I'm like,
okay, it's super powerful. It's up to you, but
Yeah.
it's really, really that 3-month container is the most powerful thing I offer.
Mm-hmm.
So most people might have missed that. Sometimes we let people in late, depending on if this would have come out next week or whatever. But otherwise, I have my Freedom membership, which is my pride and joy, because that's something I made super available for everyone. It's only $29 a month, and it's got 80 plus hours of content, 200 plus videos on inspiration. My Free Your Mind program is in there. Workshops on anxiety, depression, health, relationships. There's a community feed where you can contribute, and then I do Q&As every month. So that's something that people might be really interested in.
Awesome. I will link both.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
What are you doing for you?
For me, I'm making a difference. I feel like I get my life by virtue of inspiring other people to find theirs. Like, you know, as I said, I'm inspiring the realization of a new type of human being, and that gives me all the feeling of gratitude and fulfillment that I need. So
I love it. I just ask because I feel like I'm constantly with work. And I get the entrepreneur itch of just starting more and more and more. And then I'm like, whoa, I need to do something for myself and go lay on a beach somewhere.
Is that what you like to do? You're a beach girl? You like to just get some
No,
sun?
I'm just working all the time because I keep creating new things for myself. I don't know why.
Right. Keep yourself preoccupied.
Yeah. Where I'm like, I need to just like detach for a moment.
I do. I mean, I love life. I love my sports. I play tennis and golf, and I hike, and you know, I enjoy good conversations and dinners with friends, and I do all the things. Working out and taking care of my body feels good, and so I definitely. But when you do something that you love, it's no longer work, right? It's just sort of a purpose that to me just calls me, inspires me, and gives me purpose in terms of me getting out of bed in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah, you're excited to get out of bed.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, thank you for everything.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. Until next time, y'all.